What is happening, guys? Cody Plays here, bringing you another Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel video. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing a tier list for the board breakers in the current format. So this is the format post September 30th, 2022 ban list, and post the Newborn Dragon selection pack. We've had a few weeks in this format, and it's starting to become more and more solved the further we get into it. So I think this is a good time to start talking about board breakers and where they rank in the meta and how good they are in the meta. So before jumping right into the tier list, I have 5 categories today. Top one is stays breaking boards. This is exactly what it sounds like. These are board breakers that you can play into almost any matchup in any deck, going first or second, and they'll serve you well. Maybe not necessarily going first always, but some of them do dub over as going first or going second cards. Can't go wrong is exactly what it sounds like. You really can't go wrong with these kind of cards. They're very staple-esque. You know, you can play them in your main board, you can play them in your sideboard, and you're not going to really have a bad time with them. Trades well means it has the potential to go plus for you. It has the potential to trade 2 for 1, or maybe 3 for 1, or more than that. But it also has the potential to go 1 for 1. But it's always going to go 1 for 1, I should say. So yeah. And then trades poorly is kind of the opposite of trades well, right? It just doesn't trade very good. Usually you're going to get a plus, not a +1. You're usually going to go 1 for 1 at the best from these cards. And they're just not in a really great spot right now. And then the final category, like always, dude, why'd you craft that? Because we always have all of us have some of those cards. They're like, all right, I thought this card was good, but it is most definitely not. Jumping right on in with the first card here, we got Alpha, Master of Beast. This card trades really, really well in the current format because the format does not have a lot of big bodies necessarily. Most of the decks put up bodies that are, like 2,500 to 2,800 attack / defense. Like Mirror Jades are going to be summoned out in defense position almost always. Grandmasters are going to be summoned out in attack position at 2,800 attack. Barons, 2,400 defense. It's not a really big attack point meta. So a card like this does really good in a format like this, where you can summon this card out. It doesn't get negated most of the time, and you can just swing over something with it, or then you can use its effect to bounce it back to hand and something else your opponent controls. This is a very underrated card right now, I will say. It doesn't see much play. It sees only really play in the 8-axis / going second decks, but this card does trade very, very well in the current format. So do a lot of these going second monsters that you can just summon out into your board that have big bodies that can attack and pop or bounce stuff. So we'll talk about some of those later. This card's definitely a very good option for side decks or going second strategies. Chalice. I think this card trades exceptionally well. This can put you in a really good position to crack boards very easily. It's not as good, in my opinion, as Forbidden Droplets. I'm actually going to put this up here. I'm going to put this up and Can't Go Wrong because I think this is where it actually is. It's a great 1-for-1 trade guaranteed, but it can also be more than that. What you can do, you can start making your plays, and then when your opponent decides to negate something or activate an effect, you can just chain Forbidden Chalice to it, and then it puts them in a position where their play got interrupted, so they're not able to respond to what you just were attempting to do and they were trying to negate. So it can really trade very positively for you. And it's also got the very niche attack boost that can come up in certain situations for attacking over monsters in like mirror match situations. But that is obviously less common in a game like Master Duel. Cosmic Cyclone, I think this card trades very well currently. I think it might even be It Can't Go Wrong. But I don't think it's the best back row removal, but I think it's a very, very good option. The reason being is because the Despia cards are recyclable from the graveyard. So this trades great in that situation because you can just activate this to hit one of their back row, maybe one of their branded in red or something, and they're forced to chain it. Because they would be forced to chain it even if you hit it with an MST, right? But it forces them to chain it, which is obviously great. But if you're able to hit this on like the end phase of a turn when they set it, you're able to banish it from the graveyard, and they're not going to be able to recycle it with their tragedy. So it has a lot of applications in the current format. It's also really good against Eldritch. It's good against like specific like spot removal that you need. It's a good 1-for-1 trade against all back row. You really can't go wrong with this card. You can make the argument it's up here and Can't Go Wrong, but I think there are better back row removals in the current format. Cyber Dragon. I think this trades. You know what? I think overall this card trades poorly because it can go 1-for-1. It really can go 2-for-1 in your favor, meaning like you give up a Cyber Dragon, but you get the Mega Fleet, and you take away one of your opponent's monsters. It's good in specific matchups. I think it's good in like Dragon Link, against Dragon Link, because a lot of times they'll end with like a Borland Dragon on the board, and you can just like summon Cyber Dragon out and like, you know, suck up the Cyber Dragon and go into, you know, a Mega Fleet, which is like a really, really plus for you because it prevents them from having a lot of follow-up and a lot of like, you know, plays from here on out. But all in all, the meta is not Link intensive enough for this card to be relevant. So it's not that this card trades poorly, but it's more so like, why are you playing this in the current format? So I don't know where this should be other than this situation, because most of the time if you side this in, it's for very specific matchups that other cards are going to do better for you in those matchups. But that's kind of how I feel in the current format about Sidra. Dark Hole is interesting. I would say Dark Hole trades pretty good right now, all in all. A lot of boards are not establishing negates. Really the only deck that's establishing consistent negates is Sword Soul, and that's if they're going for Baron lines, but you really won't blame a Sword Soul player for going for the Longyan Synchro line because Nib is not really in the format too much. So Dark Hole can punish players very, very heavily, but it's not good against Protoss. It's not good against Dragon Link. It's honestly decent against Despia. It depends on their situation. They do have Branded Opening in the graveyard, so I can bait out that. So in that sense, it trades poorly because it goes -1. But if they don't have that, it can trade very well in those matchups because it can force out their negates it can force out their interruptions really early, or prevent them from using interruptions because they don't establish like hard negates. So I like Dark Hole right now, but I don't like it as much as Raigeki. I think it goes without saying though. Dark Ruler No More, you really can't go wrong with this card. I don't think it's better than Forbidden Chalice right now. I don't think it's better than the Quick Effect negates, because Droplet is not good into a Despia board. Or no, sorry, not Droplet. Excuse me, Droplet's great. Dark Ruler No More is not good into a Despia board, because you're only really going to hit the Mirror Jade, and then you're going to have to deal with the Mirror Jade again, and with the Guardian Chimera. Follow up on the later in the turn when they activate their Branded in Red. So there's better cards against Despia than Dark Ruler No More, as far as board breakers goes, and hand traps, just pure going second cards. So, but this is also like really good against like Sword Soul, against Dragon Link. You know, it's got its applications, but it's just not quite good enough to stay breaking boards every time you activate it. Forbidden Droplet is exactly that though. This stays breaking boards. This card is fantastic. This card can absolutely just dominate any deck that it goes up against. It's really good against Despia. It's underrated against Despia, I should say. It's really good against Sword Soul. It's really good against Dragon Link. It's good against all the top tier decks in the current format. And you really can't go wrong with this card. I think this should probably be in everyone's main deck or side deck, no matter what you're playing. Against Despia, you might not think it's very good, but it is, because you can just bait out the one Mirror Jade and banish they have on the board to start the turn, because usually their board's going to end with like Mirror Jade, maybe a Dragostapelia, right, and then a Branded in Red set. Sometimes their Mirror Jade effect is activated already, so they don't have it active until they activate the Branded in Red, but sometimes they have it ready to go. Let's say they have it ready to go, you just bait that out, like with a good 1-for-1 trade, and then when you start making your plays and they go for the Chimera play, you can just activate Droplet, negate the Chimera, negate the Mirror Jade, and all of a sudden they go very, very minus, because the Chimera does not get you the draws back, it does not get its pops, you don't get your Mirror Jade effect, you will get your Mirror Jade follow-up off the Albion, but it puts you in a really good situation to break that board, and to put them very far behind. So all in all, Droplet is fantastic, you can't go wrong with it. Highly recommend this card. It's also decent going first. It's not the best going first, but you can at least set it, and it acts as a disruption. Harpy's Feather Duster. This card stays breaking boards against decks that need their back row, which almost every deck in the game does currently. Almost every deck in the game sets back row. Despia sets back row, Tri-Brigade sets back row, Sword Soul sets back row. You know, usually it's like one-ofs, right? It's usually their Revolt, their Blackout, their Branded in Red, Branded Opening, like whatever it might be that they're setting. It still forces them to activate them at suboptimal times, and then you can proceed to break the board. So it usually trades very, very well. It's also absolutely devastating against Flunder. It's devastating against Eldritch, Altergeist, any back row deck that's being played right now. So this card is an absolute staple. It should be in everyone's side deck or main deck. Evenly matched, it's right up here with Droplets. This card stays breaking boards. It's probably better than Harpy's Feather Duster right now, in my opinion, because we're in a format that doesn't establish a lot of negates. That's a common theme that I'm going to be talking about. This destroys boards like that. It's great against Sword Soul if you're able to bait out the Baron early, because it banishes everything. It banishes everything face down. So Protoss can't survive it. They have to choose to save Protoss. Like, none of their stuff can really survive it except for Baron. Baron's the only one that can play around this card. And if they're not going for Baron, it puts you in a really good spot. Or if you're able to bait out the Baron with something else, like maybe with a Chalice, or maybe with like whatever it might be, right? You put yourself in a really good spot to proceed to just establish an unbreakable board afterwards, because they've used all their resources. Gozen Match is the next one I want to talk about. This is going to be a series of Floodgates I have on this tier list, because I think Floodgates are very, very good board breakers. I think they're underrated as board breakers. And this is an absolute, in my opinion, this is an absolute staple in decks that can play it. You cannot go wrong with this card in decks that can play it. It is fantastic. It is better than trades well, because it doesn't just trade well on a one-turn basis. It trades well on a multi-turn basis. This is a card that if your opponent is forced out this if you have it established on the board. And it's so devastating in a non-side deck tournament or in best of one format. Even in side deck format, when they're not expecting you to side this in, which they might be, which they probably should be if you're playing a deck that can play it. But it's all these Floodgates are so devastating when they're able to resolve, and if you don't have an answer to them. Kaiju, this is fantastic right now. I personally think Kaijus are better than like Alpha or Pankratops, which is a little bit spoiler. I'll get to that later, but I personally think these are a little bit better because they just immediately, just with the snap of your fingers, remove the problem. It just gets rid of the problem, and then you're able to proceed to attack over the Kaiju pretty easily, or just leave it on board because it doesn't matter, because it's a no-effect monster that's not going to do anything for your opponent. It might be link material, but you'll be fine. Just clear their other stuff and then worry about this. This is also very good in matchups that establish tower-like cards, like Adagnister, or Marincess. Marincess is about to get a lot of support, and it's going to start establishing cards like that. In the Zodiac strategy, they established the Mega Clops, the Link, I think it's the Link 3 or Link 4 machine guy that can't be targeted by monster effects except for Exceeds. It's like 4,000 attack. It's an absolutely insane card. It just devastates like Sword Soul, Despia, all these different decks. This is great against those cards, so highly recommend Kaijus. This is almost a staple inside decks. Those decks are not popular enough for it to be a staple, but they're definitely good enough for you to consider running these cards. And it's good against Despia and Sword Soul, like I was just talking about. Like, it's just good across the board. Can't really go wrong with it. Lava Golem, I think Lava Golem is, you can't go wrong with this card if your deck can sustain it. It's a little bit harder to sustain than Kaijus because you can't normal summon the turn you Lava Golem, and that can be devastating. But in any deck that doesn't need their normal summon, this is fantastic. And it's better than Kaiju because it can wipe out more stuff. But yeah, it's pretty much the same logic as Kaiju. So moving on. Lightning Storm. I personally think Lightning Storm is probably down here with like Dark Hole. I think it's probably on the same caliber as Dark Hole. I don't think it's really good right now. The reason being is because Harpy's Feather Duster, if you want to say like for back row removal, it can be like can't go wrong. So I guess by that logic, you could put it up here. And I'll leave it up here because this is probably more accurate. But it's best used for its back row removal right now. It's not really good against monsters because most of the time monsters are going to come out in defense position. And this doesn't really do anything against defense position monsters. So it might trade 1 for 1, which is decent, right? You would trade like a 1 Lightning Storm for 1 negate. Like, that's not bad. But it's not as good as some of the other options in the game. I think Raigeki's better than this. And I think Harpies is better than this. I think Twin Twister's better than this. A little bit of spoiler. I think the versatility of this card is what gives it the edge over some other things. But it definitely comes with its drawbacks too, right? You can't have any face-up cards on the field to activate it. So it's not good past turn 2. And all in all, I think that holds it down like too much for it to be considered one of the best board breakers in the game, in the current format at least. Mind Control. I mean, this is like a 1 for 1 trade. I think it trades pretty poorly. It can trade good depending on what you're taking. right? If you're playing a mirror match, this is really good, to be honest with you. But if you're playing against like Sword Soul or something and like you just mind control to bait out a Baron negate, you're better off just playing Chalice. Now, if you're able to bait the Baron negate out with something and then mind control the Baron, then you can just pop something on their board, which is kind of insane. But that's a very niche situation, and it's not worth playing this card over like a Forbidden Chalice. So if anything, this might be down here. Like, dude, why'd you craft this? Because I'm pretty sure this is an ultra rare. You probably shouldn't have crafted this, but I think in reality it's up here because it just doesn't trade great, but it doesn't trade terrible, but it doesn't trade great. So I would say I think this is fine for it. MST, I think MST is pretty bad right now, to be honest with you. I think it's one of the worst back row removals in the game because it's bad against Eldritch, which I'm not saying Eldritch is super popular, but it's bad against Eldritch. It's bad against Despia because they just recycle their stuff next turn. And all in all, like, you want to remove more than one card most of the time, and Cosmic just does that better. So, not much to say about MST. Night Beam, I think Night Beam is right here with MST. It's got its applications for sure. The fact that they can't respond, like, to the activation of this card, with that set card, is really, really good. There are ways to play around that, of course, like by chaining something else, then chaining your trap card or spell card to the activation of that other card. So there are ways to play around it. It's very similar to like Dark Ruler No More and like Hot Red Dragon Archfiend. If you guys don't know, like, there's interesting rulings where if you have like Hot Red Dragon Archfiend on your field and your opponent activates Dark Ruler No More, you can chain like a spell card or a trap card to the Dark Ruler, and then chain the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend's effect to the spell or trap you activated to then negate the Dark Ruler No More. So the rulings work the same with Night Beam, and that can come up sometimes, but it's not, I mean, it doesn't make this card bad. Like, this card's good because they can't respond with it, but it's bad because it's not a quick play, so it loses the ability to banish something during the end phase, like Cosmic does, or MST does, in the form of like just destroying it. And Despia can just recycle all their stuff, so you should never play this over something like Cosmic, in my opinion. But yeah, moving on to Pankratops. Pankratops is right here with Alpha. I personally think Alpha might be a little bit better right now. That might be a hot take. I don't know. I think these could be switched very easily. I think they're both very good, but I would personally choose to play Alpha because I think bouncing in most situations is better than destroying. But Pankratops can hit back row, so maybe he's here. You know what? Yeah, I'll leave him up top. I'll put Pankratops first because he can hit back row. I do think that sets him a little bit ahead of Alpha. Probation. This card probably shouldn't be on here. It's kind of similar to Salesman, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because Salesman's not out in Master Duel. I don't know when it will be coming out, if it will be. But this card's very similar to that, but it has to be on the field to prevent, like, it has to be on the field before they even activate the card. So if your opponent has like a Branded in Red set, and you activate Prohibition and call Branded in Red, they can still activate it. So it's not very good. This is more so good going first. You just activate it like Call Maxi or something, and then you can play. But it's so niche, and it's kind of a meme, to be honest with you. But I thought it was worth talking about. But it's definitely in Dude, why'd you craft that? Because you probably should not be playing this card. Raigeki. I think Raigeki is better than Dark Hole, but worse than the Pankratops or the Alpha. Because I think most of the time what this is going to do is just going to trade one for one. Well, actually, should I? Yeah, no, I think it's right here in kind of the middle of the pack of board breakers. Because I think the Kaijus in the Lava Golem and the Monster Tributors are better. And the bouncing is better from Alpha. The pop monsters or back row from Pankratops and the ability to tack over stuff is better from Pankratops. The versatility of Lightning Storm being able to hit back row or front row is better, but it's overall better than Dark Hole because you don't have to destroy your own stuff. And most decks right now don't get benefits from their cards being destroyed by card effect. So yeah, Raigeki, it's honestly can come to 3. I hope it does. Red Reboot, this is absolutely a top board breaker. This thing stays breaking boards. If you're playing against any deck that plays any sort of traps at all, you should be playing this in the side deck. Almost no matter what, this should go in game 2 and 3. Or maybe not game 3, but whatever game you're going second, this should go in. It's absolutely insane, and it should be in every single side deck. Maybe even in main decks if you're not, if you're in like a non-side deck tournament. So that's something to consider. But this card's absolutely insane. It just absolutely destroys Eldritch, it destroys Altergeist, it destroys Flunderies. It's very good against Tri-Brigade, very good against Sword Soul, not good against Despia unless they're siding in like anti-spells. Well, they're not going to side anti-spell, sorry, misspoke. Unless they side in like D-barriers against you, right, stuff like that. So it's just absolutely fantastic. Any deck that can side in going first Floodgates or going first like trap cards that are really powerful, you should be playing this for. Sphere mode, I think Sphere mode is Lava Golem's above Kaiju. That's important to note. I think I said that earlier, but I messed it up, I think. Raw Sphere mode is currently the worst of the 3 in my opinion because a lot of decks are not establishing 3 monsters. Usually it's like 1 or 2 monsters and then back row that's going to like revive monsters or in some form or fashion like Despia, or Sword Soul is going to usually put up 2, maybe a 3rd monster, but overall you should probably just go with Lava Golem or Kaiju. It's more well-rounded in the current format, and I think that's just because of the format that we're in. Also, none of these cards are good against dragons, to be honest with you, because Seal is very good against these cards, because Seal is still going to get its effect to summon from the deck, but that's just something to note. Super Poly. Super Poly is absolutely a top board breaker. Like this thing is absolutely insane, and any deck that can play it. Any deck that can play it, it's probably the best board breaker in the game. Because every deck off the top of my head loses to this. Sword Soul loses to it because usually if they're going to go all out and they establish a Protoss, Baron, Grandmaster board, 1 Despia plus Super Poly breaks their entire board. Because you can go to Perskinian and then attack over the Baron, then revive the Baron with Perskinian. Against Dragon Link, they're all Darks. It's absolutely insane against them. Against Tri-Brigade, they establish some Darks. The Omen's a Dark. It's good against them. It's not the best against Tri-Brigade, but it's got its applications. But Spiral, it's good against. They establish Darks. But overall, that's besides the point. Overall, this card's just absolutely insane across the board, and any deck that can play it should be playing it. TC Boo, this is right here with Gozen Match. I think it's worse than Gozen Match because it's not as universal as Gozen Match, but it's absolutely fantastic, and it's the same reasoning behind Gozen Match is why it's here. Torrential Tribute, this card's too slow. It trades really, really good, like Dark Hole or like Regeki, but it's just too slow to be worth it, in my opinion, in the current format. Triple Tactics Talent, this is absolutely up here. This is counter to hand traps. It's a good going first card, it's a good going second card. It might be at the bottom of stage breaking boards because it doesn't really break boards necessarily unless you're taking the monster, but it can pick apart boards very easily by baiting out a disruption and then drawing 2 cards and then continuing to play. So it's more of an extender than a board breaker, but I think it falls enough in the board breaker category to be on this list. And if it's going to be on this list, it's got to be in that top category. Twin Twister. I think this is the second best back row removal in the game. So I think this is probably, depending on like where you think back row removal needs to be, I would say it's stage breaking boards. Like this card needs to be in your side deck if you're playing back row removal. It should really be like 2 red reboots, 1 duster, then like maybe 2 twin twisters, something like that. But I think more than anything else, you really just can't go wrong with this card. You can't go wrong playing this card in your main board or your side deck, depending on the tournament. Whether it's like a best of 1, no side deck, best of 3 side deck, like whatever it is, you really can't go wrong with this card. So I think this is a fine place for it. Underworld Goddess, I think this is honestly right here with like the Alpha and the Pankratops. It's great in decks that can play it. It's great in situations where you can establish enough resources on the person to then go into this card. But it's not as good as some of the above stuff because it's not as direct of an out as like a Kaiju. However, when you're able to establish this card, it's fantastic because then it establishes interruptions in the following turns. It's very, very good against a lot of decks, and it can break boards. And then I think its effect is really interesting. It's unaffected by cards unless they target it. I think is what its effect is, which is great, which is really, really cool. And it's also got a disruption effect too, which is really good. Rivalry, I would say Rivalry is above Gozen Match, which is then above TC Boo, because Rivalry is even more universal than Gozen Match. But in that sense, it might make it worse. Maybe that makes TC Boo the best, because it's the least universal. I should probably change this around, because Rivalry can be played in the most decks currently, then Gozen Match, then TC Boo. So if you can play TC Boo, it's better. Yeah, sorry, I messed this up earlier. Forgive me. But I think this is the correct way to go about this. And any other Floodgates really kind of fall in the same category. But I just didn't want to put too many Floodgates on here. So they're great right now. You really can't go wrong with them. There's a lot of really good cards in the current format. Zeus, honestly, I hate to do it to you, Zeus, but you're down here. You're at the bottom of trades well. I don't think it's bad enough to say trades poorly currently, because a lot of times what you can do, you can establish a monster that baits something out. Then you can swing in with an Exceed, and then you can go Zeus, and you can get an advantageous trade. Middle game, this card's devastating, but early game it's not so devastating. There's a lot of spot removal, as opposed to negates in the current format, like Mirror Jade or Chimera, or Shrek Omen Banish, like whatever it might be. And this is not great against those strategies, because it kind of it's really good against negates. That's what Zeus is good against, but Zeus is not good against like spot removal. And there's a lot of spot removal in the game. So in a format where negates are heavy, like this is gonna, be top board breaker, right? Maybe not top board breaker, but in formats where spot removal is very popular, it takes a backseat to some of the other stuff. But anyways, that's gonna do it for the tier list. These are just my opinions. I'd like to hear down in the comment section below, like what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong, what board breakers did I leave off this list that I should put on for the next one. So yeah, just let me know down in the comment section below. Also, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, as well as comment down below, like I just said. If you enjoyed the video and are enjoying any of the content, I'm going to try to be doing a tier list a week, a meta report a week, and a deck profile a week, so we can kind of like stay on top of the current metagame and stay in the loop with like what's going on in the competitive scene. So if you guys are enjoying the comment, just please support the video. It means the world to me. There's been a lot of support recently, and I'm very grateful for it. But yeah, that'll do it for me. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.